How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a rear brake job on a Ford Fiesta ST. This is my 2016 ST. Now the process will be similar for most models, but this is specifically for the Mark 6, which is I believe 2008 to 2016. So in terms of tools that you're going to need before we get into the process, you're going to need the following things. You are going to need some sockets and a ratchet to go along with them. Specifically, we're going to be using mostly just a 13 millimeter, but you will want a full set just to make sure you have everything covered. Some combination wrenches are good to have as well, especially when working in sort of tight to reach places. I do like having a wrench, so this is a 13 millimeter. Again, there is one bolt that you're gonna have to hold still while you undo the nut at the end of it. And I found that a really thin wrench such as this works very well. This is actually meant for working on bicycles. It's a really, really thin cone wrench. So if you don't have something like this, if you have a thinner wrench, that would work. Maybe a thin set of an adjustable wrench or even vice grips would work, but just something to hold it still. I'll show you what that looks like when we get a little bit closer to that part of the process. The only sort of specialized tool you're gonna need is one of these caliper piston tools. So this is one that you can rent from like O'Reilly or AutoZone. They're totally free. You just put down a deposit. I think it was like 70 bucks, but they give you 100% of that back when you bring it back. You can also buy this set on Amazon. I saw them for about 20 or 30 bucks. So if you do a lot of brake jobs, you may want something like this. This works for a bunch of different models. But if it's just a one-time job, then just go rent it. It's free. It'll just cost you, the gas it takes to get to O'Reilly, and then, a little bit of your time. So this is what I would recommend. And basically just has a bunch of different tools you can use to retract the piston on the back, and I'll show you how to do that. And then in terms of supplies, you'll need some brake cleaner. You'll want to get some Loctite. So I have some both red and blue Loctite in here, the medium strength and the high strength. And then this is some brake parts lubricant as well, which is a good idea to have on hand. In addition to all that, you're also gonna obviously need your new brake pads and rotors if you are replacing the rotors as well. And then you're obviously gonna need your new rotor if you're gonna be replacing the rotors as well. These are from Bosch, the Quiet Cast ones, which again, I've had good luck with them before. They're high quality, just as good as the OEM ones, and they don't wear out very fast either, which is nice. You could get some, drilled and slotted ones if you want. I did have a set of drilled and slotted on here, but I don't autocross my car or track it or anything, and so these should last a little bit longer and be a little bit quieter, which is why I'm gonna go with them. So that's all you're gonna need for this job. And obviously you are also gonna need some sort of jack stands and a jack to lift up your car along with wheel chocks. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and get the car lifted, and then we'll go ahead and get into the process. All right, so I've got the car jacked up now. I did both the front and the rear because I'm gonna be doing both the front and the rear brakes today. But if you're only doing the front or the rear, you could just jack up that one corner. Just make sure you have all the other wheels chalked off properly to make sure you're safe. Give it a good little push. Make sure that the car is not going anywhere. Right? You're not gonna be fully under the car, but still, you wanna be as careful as you can be when you're operating near a lifted car. And what I'm gonna do actually is once I get the wheels off, I'm gonna actually slide them underneath the car to give myself just another added layer of protection, because you can never be too safe. One more quick note, if you don't have an impact driver or impact wrench sort of thing, you're gonna want to loosen up the lug nuts before you lift the car. I do have one, so I'm gonna just go ahead and zip them off right now, but you may wanna do that before you lift the car if you don't have an impact driver handy. Now, when you're working on brakes, it also is a good idea to just loosen up your brake fluid reservoir, just because as you retract the piston, as you can see, it might push some fluid up. You don't want to essentially pressurize the system, have it spill over. So I have a little rag here just in case some spills over, and you see a little bit did, but it's not a bad idea just to loosen this up so that, you know, any air or fluid that needs to move can move. So the first thing we're gonna need to do here on the rear brake calipers, we're gonna need to remove the actual caliper from the bracket here. And in order to do that, we're gonna have to remove these two 13s up here. So there's one over here and one down here. And all you need to do is just remove them. Now they're gonna be on there somewhat tight, so it's not a bad idea to grab a mallet and use that to sort of break them loose, but you should be able to relatively easily. There we go. What you might need to do is you might need to use a sort of thin wrench like this, a 15 millimeter, in order to hold this sort of nut right here in order to undo the bolt on the rear. This top one came out just fine, but the bottom one, as you can see, as I turn this, the bottom thing just spins. This part here just spins. So if you use this to hold it, you can hold that 15 and then loosen this the rest of the way. There's one and two. Now if we want to actually remove this caliper here, we are going to need to release the handbrake. So let's go inside the car and do that. And now this should be free to move, and we can sort of wiggle it out of the way. Like so. And then we're just going to place this over here for now, just like that, okay? And make sure that, you know, it's not hanging by the brake line. It isn't like this. And then we have our two brake pads right here, which we can just remove, like so. Inspect them. As you can see, mine are pretty worn, which is why I'm doing this job. And now, if we're gonna be replacing the rotor as well, which I am going to be doing so today, we wanna remove these two other 13 millimeter bolts. There's one. And there is two. And then you can just remove this bracket out of the way. And now we can remove our brake rotor. Now this bracket is probably gonna be relatively filthy. So, you know, you could just leave it like this, but if you take just a few moments in, you know, a sink, like a garage sink, or just using some paper towels and brake cleaner, you can get it to look like this. Just a few minutes of work and some elbow grease. So it doesn't look perfect, but definitely looks better than before. Let's go ahead and get this installed. But first, we need to put our new brake rotor on there. Do the other side too. All right, now we can go ahead and put our new brake rotor onto there. And then this bracket is gonna be what holds it in place essentially, like so. And then these two bolts that hold the bracket on there, they're gonna get a little bit of red high strength Loctite. And then these get torqued down to 52 foot-pounds. Okay, so now we need to do the tricky thing, which is we need to retract this piston back into the caliper. So as you might be able to see, the piston is pushed out because as the brake pads wear, they essentially, you know, this pushes out and it sort of self-adjusts. We need to push this back in, but we can't use a regular disc piston spreader, or whatever it's called, brake pad spreader, because this needs to be rotated as we push it in. So you need to use a special tool, the one I showed you earlier, which allows you to both rotate and push this piston back in at the same time. So you're gonna grab your tool, and the one that I borrowed here has this part, okay? And then you slide this backing plate onto the rear of it like so, okay? And then you need to essentially find the right attachment that fits into here. You want sort of a 4-pronged one because this has 4 little grooves. And I'm gonna use this guy. And it's got, as you can see, 4 little dimples. That's gonna fit over this guy right here. And then we just need to essentially fit this guy into here. The hard part is that if the piston is fully pushed out, it might not fit, but here I think I'm lucky. Here it's gonna work. And so we just need to match up the dimples. And it's a little bit hard to show you, but essentially you just need to get those 4 dimples to fit into the corresponding places on here. And then you essentially want to loosen this top one until it creates pressure on the back plate. And then you twist the top one, or you twist the handle, and that will start turning the piston back in. Okay, and as you can see, it is now fully retracted back into here. Okay, and now we can go ahead and get our new brake pads. And on the Fiesta, there is no rear brake pad mounting hardware, which is kind of nice. So you just gotta replace the pads. They just fit on like this. 1 and 2, just like so. And the one thing we do want to lubricate on here are the slide pins. So these just pop out from the boots here. Here's one. And here's the other. And what we want to do these guys is just clean them off and then replace the grease on there with some new brake parts grease. Then these just get pushed back into here. And now we can reinstall our caliper. And then these guys get just some blue Loctite to be safe. All right, so now we can just tighten these guys down. And again, you may need to hold this little part right here with a thin wrench in order to tighten them down. And then these guys get torqued down to 21 foot-pounds. One and 2. Give everything just one more clean with some brake cleaner, and we're all done. We can now go ahead and replace our rim onto here, lower the car, and we are good to go. I must have forgotten to charge my microphone all the way because it died over here, but essentially all you need to do to wrap up this job is go ahead and lift the car back up using that rear central jack point and then remove the jack stands from underneath the car. Go ahead and place the car back down on the ground. Also a good idea is remove the chocks if you haven't done so yet. And now we can go ahead and torque down the lug nuts in a somewhat of a star pattern given it's only 4 bolts. And we're going to torque them down to 100 foot-pounds. And then once you're done with that, you are basically done with this job. Okay, so we are basically all done. The last thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and take the car out for a spin, and we need to bed in the brake pads. Now, really all that entails is sort of basically marrying the new brake pads to the rotors, sort of getting them to know each other a little bit before we do any full power stops. What happens if you don't do a bedding in process is essentially you're not going to have full braking power, and what's likely to happen is you're going to be driving to work the next day, Nissan Altima is going to cut you off, and you know the rest of that story. So good idea is to bed in the brake pads properly. There's plenty of guides online, but essentially all you need to do is just sort of drive at 40 to 60 miles an hour, and then slowly bring the car back down to 10, 15, 20 miles an hour, and do that a few different times until the brake pads are all bedded in. Find yourself a nice stretch of road with not a lot of cars. You can do that a few times and you should be good to go. All right, thank you guys for watching the video. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was useful. Catch you guys on the next one. See you later.